Hi, Beck Mack here for Pops Art, and I am in 4101. That's right, West End, where Boundary Street meets Melbourne under one of our most famous landmarks, the UFO. And here we have the artist himself, Luke Roberts. How are you?
Good to be here with you.
Now, UFO, what does that stand for?
Unclassified flowering organism.
Uh-huh.
Yes, it's about the fact that there was once a rainforest here in West End, and also, obviously, unclassified flowering organism is doing about is referring to the unidentified flying objects. But that's about migration, because West End has been constantly shifting for the last 200 years in terms of its cultural populations, and who knows what's yet to come.
And since you've put this incredible, which conjures up many ideas and thoughts, I imagine, like it makes people stop in their stride as they walk past. The landscape itself has changed so dramatically here in West End. How do you feel about where it's sitting now in relationship to everything else?
Well, you know, to quote Muriel's Wedding, you can't stop progress. But I'm not that sort of person.
Yeah.
I came to a meeting about ABSO development, the concern residents have about so many people coming into the area. But it's inevitable, being so close to the inner city, that it's not going to stay unmolested.
Yeah.
So, so far so good, but I don't know how much traffic the streets can cope with. I think there's 3,000 people moving in over there.
Yeah. So, with this work, what's the reaction been? Do people still approach you and want to talk about it, understand it? Like, it does conjure up a lot of questions in people's minds. Yeah. What have you sort of been the feedback, or what have you understood it means to others?
Well, some people see it in a comic way, some in a kind of sexual way, some, I don't care how, you know, like I think that's actually fantastic. I've had people make all sorts of comments. They love it, and it's been here now for about, I don't know, 16 years, if I think about it. Yeah, yeah. And so it's gone through many changes. It used to emit a mist. That was at a time when the vision for Brisbane, the 2020 vision for Brisbane, was water features, and then we had the drought and everything was switched off. Right. And it's never been switched back on, the water feature, even though they replaced the pump. Yeah. But I look forward to that coming.
Does that make you sad?
Well, I won't go into it, you know. You know, I have my issues about the lack of maintenance of it, but at the same time, it's here, and I always wanted it to be a kind of meeting place, you know, a little bit of a shelter. And I always get a buzz whenever I see someone set up their guitar or set up their little booth or whatever underneath it. Yes. Doesn't happen as much as I thought it would, but you can see that there's people gather here. They love it as a site. Now that the Commonwealth Bank is sold, who knows what might happen? But I'd like to think that it's got a longer life.
Yeah. Now, we're here to talk about the one and only Pope Alice, who is one of your most famous persona, or is it a creation? You inhabit her. Can you explain how you came to Pope Alice and what she means to you?
Well, it's like, in a playful way, Pope Alice came to me. So it's like an encounter with difference, with the other, and obviously with the extraterrestrial. And so that's been a fascinating preoccupation for me. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Are we alone? And Pope Alice grew out of my reading of Erich von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods. And that changed my life. His connection, placing extraterrestrials in connection with archaeological sites and the unexplained. He still has a question mark over that, and we all do, but I do think the archaeological model at the moment is out of date completely and needs to collapse and be rebuilt, because the timelines are just ridiculous. Yeah. So
to our own First Nations culture, you know, it was 20,000, 30, 50, now it's 60. Like, you know, we're still reassessing what our impacts and who we are and what we came from, as you said. And Do you think people are kind of kidding themselves? They don't imagine that it was some kind of extraterrestrial intervention?
I think they're frightened because they think there's going to be an invasion. You know, whereas if you want to consider it an invasion, it happened centuries ago, millennia ago. I come from a strong belief. I don't like the word belief. Exactly. I'd prefer conviction or understanding that extraterrestrials are here and they've been here all the way along and were involved in actually making us. We and are involved in the formations of our religions. So,
should we be concerned? When it comes to religion, it makes me a little uncertain.
well, that's right. Well, religions are controlling factors, basically. They have wonderful stories and some marvelous practices, you know, and they teach love and compassion. But unfortunately, they get into too much dogma that divides. And at the top of them, I think it's basically a controlling mechanism. You know, you know, work hard in this life. It's a bit like Arbeit macht frei. You know, it's a bit of a sort of a loosely formed concentration camp. You'll have a wonderful life in the death after you die.
But it feels like Pope Alice is here to maybe liberate. Is she the antithesis to that? Like another solution that potentially is coming from that heritage of Catholicism, but in a new form which embraces the full potential of humanity can be.
Absolutely. Well said. It's about liberation. Her presence shows that we're not alone, sparks ideas about, well, where have we come from? Who is Pope Alice? Why is she here? And whilst I used to see her as a kind of corporation of one, even though corporation these days is a dirty word too, a marriage of one. Basically, my research shows that there are different extraterrestrials that have visited Earth, and I'm not sure where she comes from. But it's been a wonderful journey with her, and she's liberated me, that's for sure. And yes, it is about liberation, and it is about freeing the individual, personal power. We, as humans, are completely sort of oblivious to our personal power and our own sovereignty, and we need to take that back big time. We're dominated, and controlled and manipulated, and Pope Alice's message is free yourself.
I'm in.
Be yourself.
I'm in. I'm in with Pope Alice. Do you think this is the right outfit for it?
I love your outfit.
But I've seen a Pope Alice in action, and there is energy, like there is something that happens when the Pope is in the room. And from a personal experience, like, do you feel that can you remember an experience or time when things have taken you by surprise at how powerful she is?
Well, there's been a strange connection all the way along, and I'll just tell you a simple story. It goes right back to my birth. When I was the first child, my mother had a difficult birth, presenting me to the world, and she's very Catholic and wants the babies baptized, immediately. But in my case, given the trauma, and her sister ran away the night that I was born and got married, sort of in a different town, all out west.
This is out in Alpha, out in the middle of Queensland.
Yes. And it's a simple story, but significant. And I'd forgotten it once I chose the name Alice for the Pope, which came out of Alice in Wonderland. But here I am, just about 3 weeks old. My parents, hot October, central Queensland, going on dirty old dusty road to Barcaldine from Alpha. And I was unhappy. The car wouldn't have been air conditioned. And they took me down to a river and washed me and bathed me. And the name of that river was Alice, the Alice River. And I forgot about that until the story came up years later. And that's sort of part of that journey with Alice. I believe names, words have great vibrations, and there's a power in those. And so whatever it is, as I said earlier, I believe in our own self-empowerment. So I think we have more inside us than we realize.
Yeah.
So rather than being guided externally, I think we have these inner guides that pop up every now and again, if we listen to them.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Brave. And then the next step is being brave enough to, I guess, find a way to communicate them to the world.
yes.
And maybe that's what Pope Alice and the work you do is about, communicating that inner power that you've had an insight into.
Absolutely. I was a very stitched up, and still can be, quite reserved, whatever person. And prior to Pope Alice, I had this character, another Alice, by the way. They're not exactly the same person, but that's the story of that name was special as well. So Alice Jitterbug preceded Pope Alice, and I still have a great respect for Native American cultures, and particularly as a child would always dress as Native Americans. And anyway, I had this overwhelming desire to wear drag and to break free in that particular way, and I got a book by an old Native American, a Sioux man, a Lakota, and he told his story of being a rodeo clown, and we didn't so much have rodeo clowns in those days at the rodeos, but here in Australia. But and he was a straight man, but he dressed up as a woman, and he called himself Alice Jitterbug, and I went, "That's my name."
Yeah, yeah.
So that came out of the universe to me, because it was very important that the name be right.
Yeah.
Naming is very powerful. You see it when people change their names, they change their careers. Would Judy Garland have got anywhere as Ethel Gum?
I was Rebecca McIntosh, became Beck Mac, changed everything for me. And just finally, we're in West End. Trace is going to start rolling out. The artwork is put into shops like Ralph's Garage and the Chemist and the Butcher and Avid Reader. How do you feel about that idea of taking artwork out of a gallery context, putting it into everyday spaces that humans and maybe a few extraterrestrials inhabit?
Well, I've been doing it throughout my whole career. When you think of Alice Jitterbug and Pope Alice, public art, and this, public artwork, I think art has a role to play, and that is connecting with people. What's the point if it's just locked up in a museum? It's not connecting. We have to have a living culture, and so we have to communicate. We have to be out there to be seen. In 40 years it is that I'm celebrating my connection with Pope Alice, which was at Rosalie at Baruna Hall. It was the first public appearance. There's probably, I don't know, only a small percentage in Brisbane that would know Pope Alice, even though there's public appearances, not that many, but nonetheless, it is surprising who knows Pope Alice and who doesn't. But I am an artist that really believes that artists make a cultural contribution. So if you're not connecting with people, how are you communicating? How are you connecting? But that's how we used to do it here in Brisbane anyway, show and cafes, etc. Because in the 70s and 80s, we had the Institute of Modern Art, but it was fairly excluding of Queenslanders in those days. And there weren't many commercial galleries, and they were quite conservative. So any alternative art had to find alternative spaces, and it was more. I don't know. I'm sure people still show in cafes, and Trace is an example of how this is being very much stimulated. But it is a way of connecting. Of course, the other side of it is, the way that a lot of artwork is precious in that it needs certain conservative values, conservation values and proper. But in terms of how long does it go? 3 weeks or something? Yeah. Yes. So I mean, it's an interesting adventure, interesting project.
Well, I'm glad you're part of it. Thank you for coming on board, and thank you so much for Talking about this piece of work, it's always captured my mind and imagination, and, you know, I believe anything's possible out there between you and I. It's been lovely to meet you, Luke. Thank you so much.
Great to meet you, Beck.
Thank you.